a series of webinars where we explore the STEM career journeys of IMNIS Catalysts. Beyond the Lab is an exciting collaboration between two of ATSI's STEM career pathway initiatives, the Industry Mentoring Network in STEM, known as IMNIS, and the STELR program. My name is Sarah Crow and I am the IMNIS program coordinator, and it's a pleasure welcoming you online this morning. As we gather from around Australia, I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we meet. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who join us online today. As we share and discuss our own knowledge and practices, we acknowledge the deep knowledge forever embedded in custodianship of country. Before we get into the session, you would have seen that it is being recorded. Beyond the Lab and all the talks in your Shape Your Future series will be available on the STELR YouTube channel for you to revisit at any time. There's also a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in there and we'll get to them during the Q&A discussion after we've heard from our catalysts. Finally, you're going to be sent a feedback form after this session to the email that you've registered with. Please let us know what went well and what you might like to see in the series in the future. So today we're going to be hearing about the STEM career journeys of two IMNIS Catalysts. IMNIS Catalyst is a year-long ambassadorship program where competitively selected IMNIS alumni are provided with training and speaking opportunities, such as this one, to share their STEM career journeys with a broader audience. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to Francios Olivier and Dr. Ngozi Chidi-Egboka. Presenting first today is Francois. Frank is completing his PhD and he is studying at Monash University in Victoria. So over to you, Frank.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sarah. All right, so as Sarah said, I'm a PhD candidate nearing the end of my project. So before I begin, I'd also just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land from which I'm presenting on today, the peoples of the Kulin Nation. I also pay my respects to their elders past and present. Now, in my PhD project, I've been focused on a fungal disease caused by Candida albicans and trying to work out more about the interactions between Candida and this immune cell known as the macrophage. So essentially, macrophages have this ability to capture Candida cells, and then Candida have different mechanisms that they use to escape from macrophages. So there's this chase going on between the two cells that I'm trying to understand a bit more in my project. So I use live cell imaging. So one of the techniques I use is live cell imaging. And what we're seeing here, for example, is these Candida cells forming filaments that break through the macrophages that help them escape from the immune cells. And I use other imaging techniques to quantify, determine exactly how that process is happening. So in this picture here, you're looking at the blue filaments of the fungus escaping from macrophages. The red filaments are still trapped inside the immune cells. And then other methods such as scanning electron microscopy to look at this escape event in a bit more detail. So what we're seeing here is these filaments breaking through the immune cells. So my journey in research really started when I met this man about 6 years ago, back in New Zealand in Auckland. I was looking for someone to supervise my master's project. And in this meeting, so this is Silas Villas-Boas, he's now a researcher in France. And in this meeting, he said to me, Francois, the thing you need to know about science is that it's not necessarily the most straightforward career pathway. It'll definitely have challenging moments. But one thing I can say for sure about science is that it takes you places. And sure enough, 2 or 3 months after I started working in his lab, he sent me on this, my first international conference in this exotic location known as Melbourne. So my first trip to Melbourne, in preparation for this talk, I looked through my photo album, and for some reason I have, most of my photos are of trams. I had 50 photos of trams from my first visit in Melbourne. And After this trip, it gave me my opportunity to start a PhD with Monash University in Melbourne. And I can say that I still love trams. They're still amazing. I take slightly less photos of them now, but yeah, it's been a way for me to, I guess, make my jump over here. So since starting my PhD project with Monash, I've had the opportunity to present my research in different parts of Australia and also in conferences overseas. Most recently, I got the opportunity to present my work in the south of France, in Nice. And during the conference, I was approached by the researchers. It's just amazing to present your work and have people understand and appreciate it. During the conference, I had some researchers coming up to me saying, hey, I really like the work that you do. Would you like to maybe come over to our lab and interview and visit and see what our facilities look like? So I was invited to do lab visits in Paris, in London, and Amsterdam. So I headed over to those cities as well. And this, believe it or not, is the best photo I have of myself in London. Charles Darwin, the statue of Charles Darwin in the Natural History Museum, to which I saw a concerning resemblance. It's growing stronger every day. So this is essentially the main message I would convey about my journey so far, is that it's been absolutely amazing making new discoveries in science and being able to travel and share those discoveries and meet other researchers in the field. But yeah, at times it can be a challenging career pathway. And because of that, you realize at some point, after 6 years of work, I'm still a relatively junior researcher in my field. And I realized I just have to get on with life, outside of research, outside of work, and have hobbies, have interests, other things I can balance work with. So if you were to visit my Instagram page, what might you find? Well, you'll find that I like playing team sports. In my free time, I like going on hikes. I have opinions, about things in popular culture. I share opinions with my followers, and also fashion tips as well. So a lot of things to balance out life outside of work. So one thing I'd also just mention is that Twitter is like the Instagram for scientists. So if you are wondering about making a start in research, Twitter is an amazing way to connect with the science community. In fact, Twitter is the way I found out about the IMNIS ambassadorship program, and how I eventually connected with IMNIS for my mentorship. It's also a great way to share the work of your peers if you admire something someone else has done, and deliver comment on that. And also every now and then people notice something that you've done and acknowledge you for it. So if you are, it's one of the first things I did when I became a researcher, start a science Twitter account. You have to be a bit disciplined though. You have to keep the fashion and opinions to your personal Instagram account, and then try to just use Twitter professionally. So it's something I'd highly recommend. So if you are already on Twitter, or when you start a science Twitter account, feel free to follow me at Frank A.B. Olivier. And also, I've just left my lab's address here if you're curious about what we do and you want to find out a little bit more. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it there, and happy to answer any questions or take part in any discussion. Thank you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Frank. Thank you for running us through what you do at the moment. I think it's incredible that you get to go and travel and present your work in exotic locations such as Melbourne. Which is super exciting. Alrighty, so up next we have Ngozi. Now, Ngozi actually submitted her thesis last week. Hooray! Congratulations, Ngozi. I know that is such a huge achievement for you. She is studying at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. So over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'll just share my screen. I'm guessing everyone can see my screen now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Gadigal land on which I present today, and I pay my respects to elders present, past and present, and I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on this virtual platform today. You're all welcome. So I'll be taking you through a bit of my career journey from high school to where I am now. So I am originally from Nigeria. I did my high school and my university education, first degree and postgraduate, my first postgraduate in Nigeria from West Africa. If you haven't heard about Nigeria, it's part of a country in the West African region. So high school experience was very exciting. And like every other high school child, you will be left with the choice of confusion sometimes, like what would I want to be after I finish? Do I want to, most of us who want to think about those big careers, like I want to become an engineer, I want to become an astronaut, a medical doctor, a banker, you know, a lawyer. We all have those dreams and we kind of struggle with how to make those decisions. And in struggling with that, it all boils down to the subjects that we make choices with in our high school. So sometimes the subjects that might get us into some professions might be some subjects that we don't like, or we don't have confidence in going through it. For example, mathematics, some people might be scared of it. So these are my favorite high school subjects. I have mathematics as one of my first goal. I could just go on it, reading it or studying it all day without getting tired. I also like chemistry a bit. Chemistry is a bit more like they have some formulas as well. But again, you have those chemical mixtures and everything that you feel really exciting. Kind of amazing when you mix those chemicals and you get at a result or you perceive those awful smell. So I love that. And also biology is good, looking at all those algae, mitochondria, but again, it's daunting sometimes to read those big paragraphs, getting to understand them. So for some people, it's quite boring as well. And yeah, but again, I have other non-science subjects that I really like economics and accounting, which I'm also very excited. I mean, I always like and enjoy doing them, but unfortunately, I wanted to be in the science and I wanted to be a medical doctor. And so that's why you have the stethoscope up here showing. So I had to make the choice of those core science subjects. And one of those subjects is physics, which I don't like. Physics, to me, it's very boring. It's very difficult to understand. And I feel like sometimes, oh no, can I really go with this? But it turns out that it became my best score, the subject I had the best score when I finished my senior school certificate examination, which will be equivalent to HSC exam here in Australia. So geography is the one I never tried. I was a bit scared of all the big words and all the big maps and everything. But yeah, but it's something that would have been good if I had given it a go. So I feel uneasy with physics, but in the end, it turned out my best score, and it turned out to be the subject I took on more on board when I went into university. So when I was going to go to university, I needed to have my senior school certificate examination and also another exam, which was done in Nigeria as a qualification to go into university. So the score from that other exam called JAM, the acronym, is the one that takes you into the course you wanted to study. So I couldn't get the score as high enough to become a medical doctor, but I was able to have a choice of either optometry or dental surgery. So I looked at it and I chose optometry because I felt like eye is something that's more sensitive and kind of something that's more attractive for me. So I went into eye optometry and I studied optometry, and physics is a core area of optometry. So what was something I didn't like turns out to be my first school course in my undergraduate degree. So I took particular interest in the external part of the eye, which you will see up here. Just don't mind all these big diagrams here. It's just something to show you what I studied. So my particular interest was on the external part of the eye. So when I finished as an undergraduate, I worked in the private practice, and of course, and also in the tertiary practice. In these practices, in my experience on working in these different hospitals, I had a lot of interesting experience that propped up a lot of questions on my mind. Why do we have to have some of these problems in some people and not in some people, especially in the young ones like children, infants, and I began to question why are they having such blinding problems from birth? Could it be what their mothers took? Could it be healthcare that they received? Can we go into preventative medicine instead of treating them only? So that made me to enroll in Master of Public Health training as a postgraduate degree course. So I completed Master of Public Health, and that was really interesting for me. It opened my eyes to a lot of areas and how to approach research. So from my tertiary hospital clinical experience, I moved on and I became a lecturer. While I was lecturing, I found out that for me to actually be well balanced in research, I need more than public health training. And that's going for PhD. So I applied for a PhD and I got accepted into University of New South Wales, where I have just completed my PhD. So in that, on my PhD journey, I continued my research in the same area of that external eye, which I had key interest on from the onset. So in looking at that, there are different problems of the external eye, particularly the dry eye, which is a very big burden globally, and many research has been going on adults, but only not many research has been done in children. And then the report is that children don't seem to have symptoms. So I went into that research and I did all my initial reviews and all that, and I found out that actually that we could do more to find out what's going on with the children's eyes, because their own problems could be a longer problem if left unapproached or unresearched. So I took particular interest in smartphone digital devices, which has been found to be a big problem in adult population. And you could see on this picture how devices are being used by children. They are not actually different from adults. You could say that they use it as much as adults do. So why are we not looking at their eyes? So in my research, in my PhD research, I found out that the questionnaires that are being used to assess symptoms in children that made people to conclude that children don't have symptoms are actually not being understood by children. Some of the wordings there are too big for them. So we need to find out how to create one for children. That's one aspect. And then blinking also is a big issue. That's why I'm showing this blinking thing here. It's a big complement that you need to, when it comes to dry eye and health of the external eye. So I researched more in this area in my PhD. So without taking much of going too deep into this area, we found out that actually dry eye do exist in children, and the eyes of children are not different from adults. So we should approach these researches a bit more simultaneously if we want to actually deal with this problem. So it's been an interesting journey, actually, from training to become an optometrist. And then I went on to practice as an optometrist in different categories, private, tertiary hospitals. So I kind of had that broad experience, and then I went on to teaching. And so from that postgraduate experience that I had, I developed more interest in speaking, in presenting my work, because I did more of that when I was training for that degree. And so I built that confidence in presenting. I was able to present a little bit of my work in some conferences back home and also here in Australia when I started my PhD, and also another conference again. Outside of my PhD, I was also interested in educating the younger ones or doing something fun with children to get them more interested in sciences. Like Frank, my colleague, mentioned, science can take you to places. Because of science, I had the opportunity to be here in Australia. If not for science, I may not have had that opportunity as quickly as it came. So that's me here and with some kids where I travel down to regional area in Australia from as a group of UNSW Aspire team, and we are trying to educate younger ones about science, get them interested, and encourage them to go for uni education. We met a lot of kids who showed keen interest and got convinced that they need to go for uni education. So it's been an interesting journey. And then particularly what turns out to be something I was scared of. I was kind of uneasy. I find it uncomfortable to deal with. Turns out to be the best and the most important part of my career as an optometrist and my everyday practice as an optometrist. So what am I trying to say is that sometimes we just feel that this is what I cannot do and we just back out on it quickly. Try not to, just give it a go. You never know. And don't ever underestimate what you could do. What you think might be unachievable might turn out to be the thing that would announce you the more. Thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along in the rest of the program. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Ngozi. So now it is time to move into our panel discussion. So just a reminder that we are also accepting your questions. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you wish to ask anyone a question. I'll start off. I'm going to ask a question to both of you. And it's just a bit of a sort of, what do you enjoy most about what you do? And what drew you into it? What's the passion behind what you do? I'll start with you, Ngozi.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So the passion, I love my clinical practice, and I also love my research part of my career. And what draws me into it is because I see how much I could help people with what I'm doing. And I see that immediate satisfaction in my patients when I do that. So I enjoy being part of their journey in their different situations of eye problems or eye conditions. And I enjoy seeing that good returns from it. Yeah, so that's pretty much what draws me, the passion to help people and see that help, see the result of that help.
Fantastic. That's such an important passion as well. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things. I think I think Ngozi gave such an amazing answer. I think mine sounds a bit more selfish because so far for me, research has just been incredibly satisfying. So maybe it's a bit more been about me, but I love problem solving. So, it's like playing, computer games, or, you get a genuine joy from just being able to work through problems. And then the gratification, I guess, that comes from discovering something. It's not very often, but when you do make a huge breakthrough in your research, it is the most and you can't, keep quiet about it. You have to tell your family, you tell your friends, everyone has to know. No one understands what you're saying, but it's that can be a wonderful experience. I have, like Ngozi, I've been enjoying the communication aspect. It's actually very important. People think in research, obviously, often that it's quite isolated. And I think that can be the case if you're not very good at maybe, or not very practiced at communicating your research or spreading the word. But for me, the communication has been enjoyable and really advantageous. And I've basically, to wrap up, I think I found that there's in terms of the actual work hours, there's a lot of flexibility. So for PhDs, most PhDs, the case is you need, it needs a lot of self-discipline. Like you do have to kind of motivate yourself to work at particular times, but it's not like a 9-to-5 job thing. It's, you basically choose what work hours work for you. And I think most of the time, the only important thing is really the results that you see. So that's kind of made balancing other life activities a bit easier.
Thanks, Frank. That makes perfect sense. Your the joy of discovery of problem solving, I'm sure, is a universal one. So I don't think your passion and your drive is any different from Ngozi's, really. In that way. So it's interesting that you touched on computer games in your explanation, because I have done a little bit of a Twitter follow of yours, and I have noticed that you actually made a little platformer computer game for your PhD subject. Do you mind just sort of explaining what that was about and why you decided to turn your PhD subject into a computer game?
Yeah. So I'm not good at understanding how much work a particular idea involves. Like sometimes I get ideas and I think, oh, that'll be easy, and then I get started on it and I realize, oh, this is actually a lot harder than I imagined. It can be a good thing, because sometimes I think you need to, like Ngozi said, really take on challenges you think are insurmountable. But this one night, I woke up like 3 a.m. in the morning, and I thought about a part of my poster, which I was not satisfied with. And I thought, oh, what if I put a cartoon there, maybe like an 8-bit arcade game character? And then I realized, oh no, wait, what if I made a video game of that kind of helps to communicate what my study findings is about? And then I just got up and I started researching how to, put together a video game. And I pretty much just smashed it out in 14 hours straight. I just sat down and I just got it done, because I realized if I didn't in that moment get started and finish it, that it just wouldn't happen. Like we've got so many other things to do. But as it turns out, like, it was a huge hit when I presented the video game to other scientists. People absolutely loved it, and it really helped like boost engagement. People, like, by the end of it, because the game basically, you're a character, you're a candida cell that's trying to escape from the macrophages, and in order to win, you have to collect 4 gasdermin D proteins and the candida lysine orb victory to win. And that's basically just what my whole PhD project distills down to in terms of the main outcomes. The candida cell's name is Nathan, and the macrophages are McCarthy. But there's now a possibility of expanding this. A lot of people said to me, you should include other fungal pathogens and other people's findings. So maybe it'll turn into a bigger game in the future. Yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
Oh, I can imagine like a Super Mario world,
yeah,
where each level is somebody else's findings and things. I think what a fantastic way to communicate your science to a broader audience. I must admit, I had a little go at the platformer. I'm terrible at platformers, so I failed miserably, but it was a really interesting way to see science presented. So kudos and thanks to you. A little bit of a question about for you, Ngozi, just about, you said that physics is something that you struggled with during high school, and it definitely wasn't your strong suit, but you find it almost ironic now of how much physics has to do with your current job. And I'm just a little bit confused, I guess, because I don't know much about the eye and how it works. But I would have assumed that studying the eye would be all about biology rather than physics. How does physics play a part in your current job?
Okay, that's a good question, Sarah. Yeah, you're right. If you would think it's just about biology, but coincidentally, interestingly, actually, physics is the core of optometry, because when you think about vision, you think about light. Light is a core aspect of vision. So for you to see, there has to be a light travel. Light goes into your eye and strikes at the back of your eye through connections with the brain, and then translates back for you to see. Now, light is actually a physics thing, and how it travels is a physics thing. Then, apart from the eye itself, the glasses that you use, they are being prescribed by optometrists. And those lenses are designed based on principles of physics so that it will help you see. And so in those glasses, we have some plus, we have some minus ones. Take us back to our physics experiences, concave, convex lenses. That's what we're talking about, minuses and plus lenses. So there has to be light travels to that through the lenses that will help your eyes to see again. And then if you remember in physics lab, you draw those light travel thing, you put lenses and they will pass light through it. It diverges or it converges. Those are the things that we did those days in physics. And those are exactly how those glasses works that we are prescribing as optometrists. And so that's why you could give a plus lens for someone who's not seeing, who's seeing far, and then you give a minus lenses for someone who's seeing, who's not seeing, who's short-sighted, and all those things. So that's the simple explanation I have on how physics is the daily, is kind of a core practice is in optometry.
So if I can just jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sarah and I both wear, it looks like prescription glasses.
Yeah.
Ngozi, you're not wearing glasses. So does this mean that optometrists have some sort of superpower where they don't need glasses? What's the story?
That's a very great question, Frank. No, actually, no. Optometrists don't have those superpowers or anything like that at all. They have human eyes just like everybody. So if you are lucky not to be using one now, that's okay, but that doesn't really mean that you might not end up still using one as you grow older. So for some of us, we are lucky not to use one, but we might not escape it when we are older than 40. For some of us, we can just, we have to just use it now. And again, I might be wearing contact lenses also. And so you might think the optometrists don't wear it. Some of them go on contact lenses as well. So there's no super magic.
Thanks so much for that, Ngozi. Over to you, Frank. Ngozi obviously mentioned a little bit about what subjects she was good at during her time in high school and what subjects she struggled with. What about you? Was there anything that you focused on during high school, or that was not quite up your alley?
Yeah, I enjoyed biology a lot. I really gravitated towards that, not surprisingly. I liked physics actually a lot. I really, I thought it just made sense. I just sort of got it, you know, in an exam. The formula just seemed to you just had to think about it logically, and it just made so much sense. Chemistry, I wasn't actually a huge fan of. I really didn't like chemistry, and I've actually not met many. I don't know if this might be not true, but I haven't met too many people who are intensely into both chemistry and physics. I've always found it's one or the other, but for me, it's definitely physics, not chemistry. And ironically, just like Ngozi, I couldn't run away from chemistry. Like the more I went on in my research career, the more chemistry just flew into my face. So, so at some point, I started doing my first master's project was actually very biochemistry intense. Yeah, so I think that, you know, other than that, I did okay in the language courses. I ironically, actually, I didn't. This is a bit of a personal story, but I tried to do computer science in high school, and I did this one assignment that I just did horrendously, and this is homework assignment, and my teacher looked at it and he said in front of the whole class, he just said, "Oh, this is one of the worst ever attempts at this assignment I've ever seen." And I lost so much confidence. I just unenrolled from computer science, and I never did it again. But I've recently I bought a book about Python, explaining how Python coding is going. So I've been learning some coding. So I'm starting up again, despite what that teacher said. So I'm hoping to make up for the lost education and hopefully become more proficient in. The video game was a start, but I'd like to be even better in the future.
If I may jump in, I think you've already shown that you're great at it as well in your research currently by using those video emojis that Sarah was talking about to describe your research. you wouldn't have done that if you don't have a good understanding of computer. You sat down there 14 hours by yourself and you were able to come up with a result. That's huge. Some people might sit there 48 hours, 72 hours, nothing will still happen. You just get frustrated. So I think you're great at it already.
Yeah, confidence is such a big part of learning, isn't it? Like if you believe that you can't do something, you probably won't. But you really need that confidence, that self-belief is such a crucial ingredient. But yeah, the more of the game I did, the more I realized, coding is really just mathematics. It's really just a case of defining a set of parameters, writing some formula to say, I want Nathan to behave this way, I want the macrophage to jump in that way, and it's really actually a lot more straightforward than I made it out to be all that time. But yeah, it's a good point.
Fantastic. So kind of a question for the both of you. You both have not managed to avoid the subjects that you weren't very good at. Ngozi, yourself with physics, and Frank, yourself with chemistry. How do you apply yourself? Like, was it a case of you just kept at it until you understood it? Or is it a case of you need to take a different approach to get yourself to understand the subjects better? We'll start with you, Ngozi.
Me, it was a case of working a bit harder, putting in a bit more extra time and asking people that I think that know it better, kind of trying to have a study alongside with people that I think they know better than me. I ask them some difficult questions and I go back, I study more. So it was a bit of extra hard work and being determined that I'm going to be, I can just make something out of this. If I can just pass it, I don't aim to be top the list, but just make a good grade out of it, I'll be fine.
What about yourself, Frank?
Yeah, actually a bit different from that. I probably started by having to, so ironically, I ended up teaching chemistry before I really understood it very well. And I think when you are presenting to a class, principles of biochemistry, you have to not just understand something, but you also have to be able to communicate what you're understanding. Ngozi, I don't know what your experience is, but one of the things teaching taught me was that understanding something and being able to teach it are two very different things. Sometimes you have the concept in your mind, but actually explaining it to someone else is it's not just that easy. And I mean, after that, I think I probably ended up doing, like I said, just not being able to avoid it. I did research in my master's project where I detected the levels of metabolites that cells produce in response to other cells. And so we do this technique called HPLC, high pressure chromatography, where you essentially just put a sample of metabolites through this detector and it gives you little peaks showing the metabolites as they're being detected. And, it was very hands-on. You're literally seeing, oh, that's a metabolite. That's what its, ionization fragmentation pattern looks like. And then I'm like, oh, what's an ionization fragmentation pattern? I don't know. I'm going to go Google that, look that up. And so I basically worked backwards from having, the most hands-on possible experience of biochemistry and then finding out what it means or what it's important for. And I think when you're dealing with the real thing, then I think learning is a bit easier.
Fantastic. Well, I guess that's what they kind of say about learning languages, don't they? That the best way of learning a language is to deal with the real thing and to immerse yourself and things like that. So I guess that's just a different way of of immersing yourself and learning it better. So cool. Thanks for that, Frank. So a question for both of you. And if you had a bit of a time machine and you could go back in time and give some advice to your high school self, what piece of advice would you give them? I'll start with you, Frank.
It's a tough one because I think one of my core philosophies is, not being afraid to make mistakes and not really having regrets about the way things were done. So I would say don't listen to your computer science teacher. That's one thing I'd say. And yeah, I guess, I guess just, that self-belief, I do wonder sometimes, if I just had a little bit more confidence in some areas, what you can do. But yeah, like I guess overall, diversity as science teacher, and yeah, I and I guess have self-confidence where it matters, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think it's just a perfectly normal part of life in your sort of career journey, whatever you do.
They definitely are, and a mistake that you can think of as a mistake at the time can quite often turn out to be, sort of a blessing in disguise kind of situation. So great advice, Frank. What about yourself, Ngozi?
For me, it would be, don't be too hard on yourself. Try to find time to enjoy some friendship. They really matter a lot. I didn't see myself doing that in my high school. And when I look back, sometimes I wish I had done a bit more of that. Try to do things that you like. Try out as much things as possible. Don't narrow yourself to one thing that, oh, I must do this only. I can only do this only. Don't underestimate what you could do. Try to push yourself a little bit, but don't be too hard on yourself. I must say, I pushed myself a little bit into physics. Thankfully, I didn't fail it. That's why I could go into my course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do that course without physics. So don't underestimate what you could do. Don't be too hard on yourself. Enjoy friendship, get into sports, get into other activities that you enjoy doing. The most important thing is be consistent with time management when it comes to study. Just be consistent, just be disciplined to it, and just show that kind of dedication, even when your teachers think you can't do it. Like Frank had experience, ignore that and just be consistent in your own study that you think you can do it. Yeah.
Can I jump in, Sarah?
Of course.
I feel like I don't want to. Both my parents are teachers, so I don't want to give a bad rap or bad rep. Give this idea that I don't like teachers. Ngozi, and Sarah, I don't know. You might be able to speak to this as well, but we've all had, despite the one experience I highlighted today, we've all had teachers that do the opposite. They really inspire us. Have you guys had any teachers that really inspired you to just be awesome, or just be yourself, or do what you do today?
For me, I can't exactly remember personally in my high school time, but in my university education, yes, I have one. But for my young child, she's got one teacher who has inspired her, who made her to believe in herself, and she's doing amazing things with that experience she had with the teacher. So when we moved from overseas to Australia, my daughter found it so difficult to engage with other kids, and then her teacher made her believe in herself. Her teacher got her engaged with other kids using different strategies, and that's helped to build confidence in her. Simple things like having someone to have lunch with every day. Those are one of the tasks for her. And that helped her to build friendship. And then in writing as well, as a young child, there are ways that the teacher has been able to make her to understand and to apply writing. And she's doing amazingly well now with writing. So for her, that teacher is someone she would never ever forget in her whole life. She made a whole speech appreciating her when she was leaving that school. And I believe that experience for that little child will go a long way to kind of influence how she goes along in life. And if she finds herself to be a teacher someday, she will go a long way inspiring her students as well. Yeah, so for me, it's an experience for my child, but also a great experience for me. And it tells me how much we can inspire people by the little things that we think we are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that has been a wonderfully positive note to end the session on. So I'm afraid that's all the time we have this morning. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Ngozi and Frank for sharing your STEM career journeys. Beyond the Lab is made possible thanks to IMNIS's major partner, MTP Connect, and is part of their READY initiative, the Researcher Exchange and Development in Industry program, a $32 million initiative made possible thanks to the Medical Research Future Fund. So don't forget to fill out your feedback form after you leave this session. The Shape Your Future series will be continuing all year, so tune in to hear from many more scientists, and all the information is available on the STELR and the ATSI websites. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.